Yo, what's up, everybody? It is Monday, April 28th. We got Adam Peak
Hey,
live from
from the
nowhere.
van.
Yeah, from the van down by the
Yeah.
river.
Yeah, I'm on a van down by the river.
What
Um,
what are we talking about today? And I think we're covering design. I had a conversation the other day with someone. We were looking at some CPG packaging, and it was like a refreshed pack for a product that had launched like a year or two ago. And we're looking at the refresh. I'm not a CPG packaging designer, and the first thing they do is they look at it and they read the front cover, and they're like, they're missing the key point that would make this brand different than everything else on shelf. And I hadn't even spotted it. And they're like, they're going to be in for another redesign probably in the next 12 months. So this was a 12-month redesign, and they're like, this is the one key thing that's missing. They'll probably do this again in another year. And a lot of times with companies, they don't realize that when they launch packaging, it's like a test, right? And then all of a sudden, once it hits, consumers are going to react one way, retailers are going to react a different way. And if you want to boost sales, you got to really kind of fine tune that stuff. So I wanted to kind of cover a little bit of that.
yeah, let's talk about it.
Let's do it, man. Being on
Cue the intro music.
good stuff. All right, man. So
Yeah.
have you, on the print side, on the production side, and kind of working with a lot of startups, have you seen this in the past?
You mean where somebody creates their initial packaging design and then has to reiterate pretty quickly, or they just forget stuff?
No, like they've got to reiterate pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, I would say especially early on in
Mhm.
the cannabis industry, when I was in Colorado, I saw a lot of it where and it was branding, it was different materials, because it was also new. Is the retail cannabis industry was also new, so there was a ton of it. I think it happened at almost every print run. They almost couldn't be in traditional print. They almost had to be in digital because the regulations were changing, the materials were changing, the laws were, everything was changing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's up, dude? How you doing? Good? People just walking behind me at my window trying to
Nice.
join our live stream. They're trying to become internet famous. Yeah, I mean, I think it happens quite a bit. Either it's a big change. I don't think brands will change the 90% of like this is what makes our brand, but the language, maybe the colors, they change contract manufacturers because it just wasn't the right fit, and so they have to, maybe there's a different form factor. I don't know, but the early stages of a CPG startup from a packaging standpoint are rough.
It really is. And when a lot of times they're either getting funding or they're bootstrapping the whole product, the whole launch. And then what happens is like, they're focused on product. 'Cause that's really what the important part is. Like towards the end, they'll bring in design, branding. They'll bring in either a big agency or they'll bring in somebody they know to kind of work through some of the design. Even doesn't matter how big of an agency you're working with. What tends to happen is like you get like beautiful design and there's great storytelling and there's a lot of experience, but there's not any hard data because you can't really run, you can't run every scenario. So you get it into stores and then consumers are confused. You're not getting the shelf space that you thought you were going to get. So now you're maybe like in a confusing section of an aisle and you've got to tell a story. That's a little bit different, right? Or your printer can't hit the colors, right? Or you've got beautiful design and it's like an 8-color print and you can't afford that. So now you've got to have your manufacturer change the design in order to be affordable. And now it kind of falls flat.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing would be, even if, because there's so many brands who start up now who don't go retail, right? They go direct to consumer. And so you might start with the digitized version of of your product, and it looks really beautiful on a Kickstarter or on an Etsy launch or a Shopify launch or whatever it is, just as a digital image. And then you collect, let's say it's Kickstarter, you collect enough money, you then go to production and you get your quote and you're like, oh my gosh, like you said, this is a 10 color printed folding carton. I can't do that. And then you go find another designer to help you get it sort of like a production artist almost to get it
Yeah.
changed. Um, I know I can tell you, like when my son and I launched the Weenus Lube company, I got our first batch of product and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to change all of this packaging um, for our next run. I just can't. It was too big. I didn't actually like the label on the tube, even though that's what we needed to do. I would have rather had it been in a pump with a label on it. So, it's like all of a sudden you actually get the product and you're like, I should do something different next time. Not change up the brand or the colors or the feel, but
Yeah.
just a different form factor.
Yeah. And it's funny because like the thing we were looking at when this conversation happened was rotten, right? So rotten
Oh
candy.
yeah.
And I'll share this here on my screen here in a second. But if you guys are watching and you've ever seen like a brand launch a product and then instantly
What's up,
do
guys? Got a
run
couple
into
people.
a redesign, yeah, they're in their product. That's the production crew. They're setting up the lighting for Adam.
Yeah,
But if
yeah.
you've
For
ever,
my,
if you've ever
it's
seen
my
like a quick
CNN spot.
yeah. So if you guys have seen any like a brand launch and then have a quick redesign, like throw it in the comments which one it's been and maybe like what your thoughts are. Also, let us know kind of where you're watching from. But like just sharing the screen here. Let's go and take a look here. We need Charlie back.
Should I ask one of these guys? Hey.
So like, all right. So we've got rotten. Rotten is one. Rotten tastes great. It's a
Incredible.
killer candy. Love it. But they've got, you've got like a big logo. You've got some illustration. You've got the illustration of the candy. You've got the name, right? So Gummy Crunchies original. Because I love the brand, I'm going to pick that up. I don't even care about what it says everywhere else. But if I'm looking at this for the very first time, like, what are you actually getting? Like, if you look at this, Adam, I don't know if you can see this.
I can.
Okay, perfect. So if you're looking at this packaging, like, what's the first thing that stands out to you?
It's sort of the Garbage Patch Kid vibe, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. It
But why would you
it's
pay double for this versus the Nerds version of this candy?
because of its product location. So it's probably mixed in not with the Nerds candy, but with the if it's on shelf, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
probably next to the healthier for you candies because that's what it is. It doesn't use any of the dyes that I think just got banned. In the US, it's got, the less sugar, it's got all that kind of stuff. But I think that it would draw my attention first of all because it's
Mhm.
so unique and different from the rest of the products that are in that set at the store shelf. If I'm online, I'm probably online because somebody recommended it or I tried it or
Yeah.
I saw an ad on Instagram or something like that, right? So I think online is a little bit of a different beast. But if I'm in the store and this this is next to the other low sugar candies, I think I'd be like, wow, what is this? And then I'm imagining if I'm a kid, it's like, hey, wow, this looks cool. I should
Mhm.
try it.
But it's like, yeah. So like, it's playing off the liquid death different for different sake, but this isn't necessarily challenging that space. Let's see, what do you got? Chris Olson saying you don't actually see the larger size of the candy. Yeah, you don't, but I think the other part too is like you're getting the name rotten. Okay, you get what the product is. Yeah, I think definitely getting a little bit more clarity on what the product is would be helpful. But from a benefit standpoint, like again, I don't do this kind of packaging design. So I don't necessarily look at it from that perspective. But the first thing they spotted was like, all right, it's got prebiotic fiber. So it's supposed to be better for you in that sense. If I'm buying junk food, am I really looking for that? But if that's the key benefit, that's what I'm getting from this, then maybe that's something that we need to pull out and focus on a little bit more. Colors from fruits, veggies, and superfoods. I don't know how important that necessarily is. Less sugar.
I'll tell you exactly what's happening with this because and I actually think this is brilliant packaging design because it plays off of the idea of emotional connection versus logical rationalization. And so if you're a
You have to
kid,
remember it's twice as much as a competitor.
yeah, but kids don't know that. You're talking about a rational pick, right? So imagine you're in a store and it's a teenager or it's a preteen and they see this and their friends had just talked about it or whatever had happened. And they're like, oh, this candy's so good. And they pick it up and they recognize it. It's not, it's a recognizable brand, which is why they actually had to make a change in their packaging because people were losing their brand a little bit. So they grab it off the shelf, they take it to their mom, they take it to their dad, and they're like, I had some of this and it was so good. And then the mom looks at it, or the dad is not emotionally connected to the brand, but they're going to make an intellectual decision now. That's where they see the product's already off the shelf because the person who's going to pull it off the shelf is the kid in this case. They see the no artificial dyes. That's a huge deal for a lot of.
If you're a kid, you don't care.
No, the kids only want to see the logo, right? The kids see the whole thing. The kids don't care about that stuff, but the kids don't necessarily spend the money. It's the parents, and so this is
Dude,
why I think
are you gonna buy if you see this as a parent, if you're the one spending the money, right? Like you said, are you gonna spend that much more money for this product that your kid's trying to ask for?
100%, all of the time.
Why?
We do it. Parents do it constantly.
Why? Why would you pay more for this as a parent?
Because you want to give your kids something that they like. Kids like candy, right? But candies have all the artificial dyes. They have all the high sugar content. There's nothing valuable other than the candies taste good. And it gives your kid a little bit of a candy rush and you feel like a good parent because you're doing something nice for your kid. That's all well and good. So you can deliver on that same emotional sort of feeling, but as a parent, you feel like you're a good parent because you're giving them prebiotics. There's no artificial food dyes, which are apparently bad for you. I'm not a nutritionist. The lower sugar content is a really big deal. So now you can intellectually rationalize the purchase. And let's be honest, if you're talking about buying them a $2 bag of candy or a $4 bag of candy,
yeah, we're
not talking about $100 versus a $250 pair of jeans. Like this is a purchase that's just like, yeah, okay, whatever, right? But you feel fine about it. Like you feel like you are treating your kid to a treat that is also not harming their body. And I think that's why you have that's why it's not leading with that. Because it was leading with that, I don't think kids would want it. I think the parents would maybe be okay with it.
Real quick for Chris's question, when it says 60% less sugar, it's hard to read what it says in here, but I don't, it says 60% less sugar, but it doesn't necessarily say, there's some white tiny print underneath there. It doesn't necessarily clearly tell you what that is.
It's a lot less sugar than the Nerds clusters.
Yeah, but it doesn't say Nerds clusters, right?
I know they probably can't put that.
Yeah, exactly. No, but it's super good. Product tastes great. Visually, let's see. We got Carrie coming in saying she disagrees that parents will buy this, even though it says gut healthy and 60% less sugar. In words, it communicates cheap junk candy, and I'm not sure I would even believe the better for you call outs. Yeah, that's a good point, right? It really kind of leans into this super heavy, but I think if we were to change a few things, one, visually, I would want to change a couple things. The Rotten logo and the Rotten character and the candy, like all three of those guys share the same amount of space. So there's not like one focal point where you want to look at that draws your eye. Right? If we're looking at like a Liquid Death, logo's larger than the skull, and then you've got plenty of white space around there to kind of see what's going on. And I know that's the target these guys are going for. So maybe making that character larger so that becomes like the go-to things that you see, or rearranging that logo to make that stand out a little bit more. One or the other. Or
but remember, Rotten and Liquid Death have two different. They have completely different customers that they're going after.
From when I interviewed Rotten before they launched, like that was the big focus. Like we're the Liquid Death of candy. Like
The idea of what Liquid Death did to water is the same, but
they were going after the same market from that conversation. Right.
They were going after people who drink beer that want to like.
No, that's not what Liquid Death was either. Right. It was the focus of hitting that like teen market that wants to do something different.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
But I think that's kind of where this is too, right? It's like you want to be that kid that pulls this thing out, and it's like, what is that, right? You want to gross out your parents, or you want to be like so different.
I can tell you with my 5 kids, every one of them, when I got this, I got some of this candy, my 9-year-old said, "Can I take these to school because I want all of my friends to see it?" My 17-year-old was like, "This tastes incredibly good. Like, I would love to have some. This would be the ultimate road trip candy." My wife looked at it, and at first she was just like, "What is this nasty stuff?" Kind of like what Carrie's comment was. And then she read all the stuff in the back. She's like, "Oh, actually, this stuff isn't bad," like she would with cereal.
But to Cameron's point, when you're in a retail setting, you're not going to stop and look at all of the details, right? You look at it and you assume it's not good for you. Right. So
but remember but context is critical. If this is just in the middle of all the rest of the candies, if it's right next to the nerd clusters and it's 2 times as expensive, I think it's not going to get picked up. But it's not set in that setting. There is a whole other low sugar, healthy for you candy setting that's at the end of one of the aisles that this is next to. So this is next to Sweet Smart and a whole bunch of other products. I think this actually stands out on the store shelf.
Oh, my grocery store has them all piled together.
Yeah, so it just depends on. Now they're in the same aisle. Yeah. It's just that the 4-foot section, like what we talked about. Calm down, dog.
I didn't agree.
In that 4-foot section where we were talking about the other day with the Liquid IV, and if we're saying like people look up and down just in that 4-foot section, this is in a 4-foot section with a bunch of other healthy for you, probiotic, prebiotic, low sugar. Everything is leading with health.
Carrie wants to know if you're an investor.
I'm not. I'm not an investor.
And I love Rotten. The candy's great. Founder's great. Like the whole thing is awesome. Like, but I think that brands play it too safe. And no, I'm not an investor. I've gotten free candy from them one time. It was great. This is a refresh. And the conversation, kind of going back to the point of the conversation here is, you're gonna have to like redesign again, right? Like brands when they start up and they hire a design agency. It's a big
getting so hot in my car, by the way. I gotta crank the correct. Didn't quite realize that the sun would be when I parked. It's like, ha.
But that's like a big part that happens, right? When you launch a product, nothing against Rotten, definitely go try it out because this stuff it's really good. But it's like you launch, you've got to make tweaks. It doesn't matter what agency you hire. from the top agency to some Fiverr agency, you're going to have to make changes, not because of the design, the person behind the design. It's because once it hits market, you're going to see some holes in strategy. And there's no way to see those, right? You can't necessarily see what's going to happen. It might sell really well in one part of the country, maybe not in another for one specific reason. And then you've got to go back in and tweak it. Retailers might be confused. They might put it in the wrong section. They might put it right next to nerds clusters because it's not clear that this is the better for you product. Like
Right.
whatever those reasons are, you're gonna have to go back in and redesign. But I think for this, like we were looking at this at Foxtrot Market. Everything there was all like better for you candy, like in that whole section. Like the whole store is pretty much better for you, everything. This one didn't necessarily communicate that it was better for you as clearly as the other products that were next to it. So the idea was like maybe it's that prebiotic fiber, maybe that leads a little bit more than less sugar, right? Because when you see less sugar, you kind of think of that aspartame flavor, right? You're like, oh, this is going to replace it with stevia or whatever that.
Right. Like that Diet Coke kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instantly, that's like a turn off. So it's like kind of finding like what do you actually need? Question here from Carrie is, I would actually buy it after this educational conversation. I'm just saying, communicate better. I'm just saying at the point of purchase, it could communicate the better for you aspect a little bit better without losing the kid's attention. And that's kind of the point, right? It's like, what part of it is better for you? Can you make that interesting? Can you make that follow the rest of the design? I also think, again, that character is really cool. The fact that it's sitting in the crunchy, gummy donut hole, or like that's kind of cool. Make that larger. But I think everything is really competing against itself in here, which from a visual standpoint, I think kind of makes it a little hard.
Yeah. What
Question
Chris say?
from Chris: how would gathering more feedback in the design process have helped the brand?
I think that they're still in the design process. I mean, I don't think the company's very old. It's only 18, 24 months or 3 years. So I think they're still in the phase of gathering, and they've been kind of building it in public. And so it's just been interesting to kind of follow along with the brand. So yeah, I mean, I think that they seem to be pretty open to feedback. I mean, he had a LinkedIn post and I had him come on this show on a Friday and we talked about it. And I think I've appreciated the transparency of the brand. And there's also an unapologetic tone to what they're doing that I think it's lost in a lot of branding today, especially with startups, where it's like they'll go to the store, they'll play it safe so they can get, and then the retailers also want to kind of play it safe. So you just get a lot of sameness at these retail shelves. And so I feel, maybe I sound like an investor, maybe feel like I'm being defensive, because I want for brands to feel bold and courageous. Actually, I had a post. I'll tease my talk that I'm giving on Sunday next week in Pittsburgh, but there's a great quote that says the opposite of courage in our society is not cowardice, it's conformity. People acting the same, people doing the same thing without knowing why or what direction they're going. And I see that in a lot of brands. And so whether it's Liquid Death or it's Rotten or, pick a brand down there, I appreciate brands who are willing to be courageous and stand out and not do everything that everyone's telling them to do. And I think that they're winning. I really do. Because they create emotion, positive or negative. People hate Rotten and they share all the negative comments as well.
I love the product. Definitely go check it out. I just think from the other thing, well, just kind of getting back to the point of having to redesign, a lot of times what happens as well is once you launch and you get that feedback from the market and you're growing, sometimes founders will bring in a CEO or they'll bring in a CMO like in-house to help kind of manage that conversation. When that person comes in, they're going to have their own views and they're going to want to make some changes. I know, for example, There's United Sodas of America, which is like a solid can.
Yeah.
And it just was like super minimal. I'll give just like a quick picture here of what it used to look like.
Yeah, they won a bunch of awards too, with the shrink sleeve can and kind of the matte finish on it. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was super cool. The team over at Center Design worked on this. I had a chance to work on some of this project with them as well. But like it was just flavor and size, right? So extra peach, orange nectarine, like gave you super clean. And then just to be clear, I didn't work on any of the visual. I just worked on some structural with them. But then we look at the new United Sodas. Now they've got like United Sodas on the front. They've got the flavor, and they've got some additional information down below. So like since then, they've made changes. And it's not because it was a bad design. I think for the most part, it was they brought in new management essentially.
Yep.
And that tends to change things. So
yeah,
I think that the lesson here is if you're launching something, expect to redesign.
Yeah, be open, be flexible, be willing to take input from especially customers. But we've talked a lot about I think it was on Friday about like you can go get data about this stuff. So you can have customer feedback. You can go to Package Insight. You can go to I'm sure there's a bunch of other places that you can get actually some data. But the most important data is going to be your sales data, and that's going to be reactive. And so don't be so tied to something that you submarine your brand.
And that's the challenge, is not being so precious about it. Yeah, it costs you a ton of money to get that design in the first place. And people feel like, but I paid for this. I don't want to make any changes. But if you want to sell it, you kind of have to.
One other thing I would say is I remember Erica Rankin talked about this when she had her Brodo company, and she talked about how she almost or maybe she did. I think she paid for like a Flexo run of some product because the price per label or the price per it might have been a tub. I don't remember the specifics, but was lower than if she just did a smaller run but did it digital. And that was a big mistake, just because you can buy a lot of something and get your price per unit down, but look at the overall cost when you're starting. Like, look at your cash outlay, keep it minimal so that you can pivot, you can adjust, find contract manufacturers that have low MOQs, probably lean into digital printing when it comes to some of this stuff to match those low MOQs so that you can stay flexible and kind of bob and weave a little bit until you start to solidify.
Yeah, you should definitely pay more for less in the beginning because it's going to cost you less in the long run. 100%.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Good stuff, man. If you got any questions, or you guys have launched a product, or you have any examples, like throw them in the comments. We'll keep watching and keep sharing. Adam, looks like you've got
I gotta run here. I got a 9 o'clock meeting. So, and the sun is pounding. The sun is beating down on my face.
You're getting a left side tan. All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us.